Welcome to the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast on this Friday, November, what is it, 14th? Fantastic. And we're looking forward to flying with Tom Merman. We will get started right at the top of the hour. For those of you just joining us, thank you so much for being here on the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. We're going to get started right at 12 o'clock with Tom Merman. Welcome to Zeitgeist Design and Production. I'm Becky Kiefer, Studio Director. Here inside the Zeitgeist Creative Studio, imagination rules and time is always of the essence. This is where immersion artists, Ryan Harmon, Joe Cicero, and the world's top experienced designers study the past and spend the present envisioning the future of location-based entertainment, or what we like to call UXIRL, user experiences in real life. The Spirit of the Time Zoomcast offers a sneak peek behind the themes. Each month or so, we move you without a ride system, inviting one incredibly talented and influential colleague aboard our time machine. We set the controls for milestone moments in that person's career and attempt to unravel the mystery of what makes a guest experience timely yet timeless. And because we're live, you can type questions into the chat box, and our passenger will answer them after the hour-long journey. climbing aboard our time machine today is probably the most respected and accomplished theme park operator walking the planet, Tom Merman. Beloved by all, Tom Merman has run day-to-day operations at a few domestic and international parks you may know, including Knott's Berry Farm, Camp Snoopy at Mall of America, Parque Warner Madrid, Hong Kong's Ocean Park, Universal Studios Beijing, and then all three parks in Universal's Pacific Rim portfolio, adding Universal Studios Japan and the one that started it all, Universal Studios Hollywood. It's now my pleasure to introduce our time machine pilots, Zeitgeist President and Chief Creative Officer Ryan Harmon, and retired Disney Imagineer and animator Jolyn Cicero, along with a man who loves dressing up like a zombie, sliding across the concrete on his knees, and scaring unsuspecting Halloween fans with sparks and growls, Tom Merman.
Whoa.
Hey there.
Thank
Hi,
you.
am I here?
Hi, everybody.
Hey,
Hi,
Ryan.
Joe.
Well, we just came
Wow.
back from 1946.
1946 in Atlanta. And we went there because, Tom started off at Knott's and they had a log ride, and Disney built their log ride based on their 1946 film, The Song of the South, which we're not supposed to talk about. And, it won Oscars for Zippity Doodah, and it's celebrating its 79th birthday this week, and the Big 80 next year. It'll be interesting, Joe, to see if acknowledge it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think, and I think Disney was always a little jealous of the fact that, that park just down the street had maybe the best log ride in the world, and
definitely.
it's debatable, it still may be, but
Yeah.
we'll ask Tom more about that later. So let's welcome Tom.
Yeah, Tom,
Time
welcome
machine.
to the Spirit of the Time. We're excited to time travel with you today.
Thank you,
Very
guys. I appreciate it.
Sure. So I just got to say, I had an experience with Tom in Hong Kong. Becky and I went out to visit him a while ago, and he was so generous and nice and took us on a golf cart tour of the park. And we had a beautiful lunch in an underwater restaurant. And it was so fascinating to me because everywhere we went, everybody in the park would smile when they saw Tom and wave and say hi. And it was like Tom was a character within the park, just so beloved and so respected. And I don't know if I'll ever get to that. Probably not, but
Probably not.
probably not. But I just felt like, wow, this guy does it right and knows what he's doing. And that's a testament to you, Tom, and how awesome you are.
I'm
So,
sure he got that same kind of welcome and reaction everywhere he worked, because
Yeah.
that's who he is.
yeah, exactly. So let's start the controls. Let's set the controls. I'm thinking maybe around 1969. It's kind of like we're at Disneyland and you're running around as a 10-year-old on Tom Sawyer's Island. What are you doing here? What's going on in your life and living in Orange, California? Tell us.
Actually, born in Orange, California, living in Buena Park. But
Even closer. Okay.
anyway, yeah, Disney was a very common destination for, I think, any kid who grew up in Southern California. And back in those days, tickets were pretty easy to come by. It was general admission plus ticket books. Disney used to be closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. So, there were a lot of Friday private parties. And I don't know why, but the people who I live in the neighborhood with used to get, private party access. Maybe it was the company that was renting the park that evening, but I was out there a lot in evenings for like Friday private parties. But in the daytime, you'd get to go on Tom Sawyer's Island because I think it closed at dusk back in those days. And that was a fun place. You just go, hang out with your friends and run around playing hide and seek on Tom Sawyer's Island. But it seemed like back then, even though it was crowded, it was nothing like the parks are today. It seemed like you could ride anything for as long as you wanted, move around the parks. I got exposed to Knott's as well. My father used to take me out to Knott's because it was literally down the street. I think Friday nights, my mom may have worked late when I was even younger. And my dad's big thing was, let's just go to Knott's. We'd eat at the Ghost Town Grill. We'd walk around Ghost Town. We'd visit Sad Eye Joe's, play on the coal mining train. And watch the blacksmith work and walk through the livery. But I mean, they were just some really wonderful kind of transport you somewhere else, forget your worries sort of experiences back in those days. And we just did it like it was a normal course of what you do every day. I think sometimes people who come to the parks from outside of California probably have more awe in their eyes than we would. We probably got so exposed, you got used to it, you got jaded, you just didn't look at it with the same experiential lens. But you
Yeah.
certainly knew what worked and what didn't work and what kept you entertained.
Yeah. Now, did Knott's use a ticket book like Disneyland? And
They did
how did
same
they
thing.
identify E through A?
It was the same approach. You know, if it was a big family ride like the log ride, that would be obviously the equivalent of an E ticket at Disney. I think we did the reverse. A tickets were considered the best. So,
Oh,
you know, there were certain variations that were made to allow us to stand a little differently, but we had the general admission at Knott's and we had the ticket books and we had the ticket booths throughout the park. So, and three different gates. I mean, you could come in off of Western Avenue, you could come in off of Knott Avenue, you can come in off of Beach Boulevard back
yeah.
in those days when they finally put the fences up and the gates up. And it made a different arrival experience because you parked on grass out in the fields that used to be the farm, and you would walk across the street and come in those gates. So eventually they consolidated everything at the Beach Boulevard Grand entrance and, you know, obviously went to a full price admission as opposed to the general admission and ticket book, same as Disney. That all kind of happened. God, it seems like it was right around 83 or 84. I think just before the Olympics were coming, Disney went to a 7-day-a-week operation. So did Knott's. They got rid of the Monday, Tuesdays. We got rid of the Wednesday, Thursdays. And then we went to 7 days a week, thinking the Olympics were going to be a big deal, would drive generous amounts of traffic to all the parks. But as everyone finds out, the Olympics tend to be more focused on the Olympics, and every investment made, you still reap the benefits down the road from the investments you make, but
Right.
you didn't see it the year of the Olympics. I think Atlanta saw the same thing. I think every Olympic city sees the same thing. They have big expectations, but those people came with a particular purpose.
Right. Yeah.
So let's put the controls to 1976, and there's a
Yes.
long-haired kid applying to Disneyland to work there. What happened there?
Yeah.
This is pretty funny, Joe. My brother was a sweeper at Disney. He had previously worked at Japanese Deer Park and Village, and then moved over to Disney and got a job there. And I thought when it was time for me to get my job, because I was driving, I had to pay for my own gas, pay for my own car insurance. I thought, well, I'll just go over to Disney. My brother's there. I'm sure they'll hire me. Now, I walked in the door and applied, and the first thing they told me was they wouldn't be able to hire me because my hair was too long. I got to put things in perspective. The hair was just touching the top of my ears and just touching my collar. But if you
Oh,
remember back in those days, Disney was pretty strict about their grooming standards. And
Oh yeah.
now the parting shot on my way out the door was, oh, by the way, you're not 18. We don't hire anyone under 18. So my hair was secondary. I tend to make it primary, but the real issue was I wasn't 18. So I went down the road and Knott's was hiring minors in their sweeper department, and the rest is really kind of history. But I
yeah.
didn't take the job with the intent that it would be a career. It was simply going to be a summer job, and I'd figure things out the following summer when I graduated from high school.
Yeah. So in 1977, you decide you want to be a dentist and you go to USC and study chemistry.
That is correct. Well, I went to USC for general education, but I
Yeah.
realized chemistry and I were not friends. I just I just could not calculate the molecular weight of anything. I couldn't. I just realized chemistry and I were never going to get along. But I had I had an affinity for psychology, and I think back in those days, and I'm not sure how young your listener group will be, but there was a time where just getting a degree was the objective. It wasn't so much what the degree's in, and I would have been the first in my family to have gone and received a degree from universities. So I shifted from USC over to Cal State Fullerton. I shifted with probably more units in psychology than anything. And then I declared a psychology major at that point, with the intent being more focused on I'm going to get my degree and then I'll look at postgraduate schoolwork. Because again, I never thought Knott's was a career. I just thought Knott's was a means to an ends. It was going to lead me to the next, opportunity where I'd get a real job. I think it was about 6 years in when I realized, hey, this is a real job and a real opportunity.
Yeah. Wow. So you told Knott at that point you wanted something more substantial. And what happened at that point?
Yeah, I had gotten my degree and I was applying for grad school or for postgraduate work. And I thought, I really do want to keep working and maybe I can go to night school. And so I went into human resources and said, I'd love to be able to stay, but I really need to look for a real job. This is probably around 1982, 83.
Right.
And lo and behold, I get this comment like, well, look, there's opportunity here. We'd love for you to consider it. And about that time, I was still leading the sweeper department. At that point, I'd become, I think, the manager of sweepers. And um, one of my daily routines on a really busy day was to go out and walk all the bin areas where the trash was being collected for the day. And we had some very landlocked, very limited areas for the trash to be collected where there weren't compactors. And so one of them happened to be right beside Ghost Town, right near the Calico Saloon. And I could actually climb up on the fence, then get up on the roof of what was called the Murphy residence and literally jump off the residence into the big bins to compact them. So I was the human compactor. And
Oh my God.
a gentleman named Joe Meck, who was leading operations at Knott's at the time, and a fellow who was the marshal of Ghost Town, Max Barlow, saw me. And Max knew me, and Max knew I did this, but Joe didn't. And Joe said, "What is he doing?" And Max told him, and Joe says, "I want to meet him." And I think Joe thought that initiative, that creativity, no mention of the safety issue, no mention of
Right.
anything else, but
Right.
that initiative and that desire to keep the operation running impressed him, and he offered me to move into admissions and said he'd like to get me into the operations management role, which was a rotating role for the company. Led to numerous opportunities, and as you've heard me say before, opportunity doesn't make a reservation. And so I jumped at it and then got in from there, got into rides and began running rides in 1984, late 84.
Okay.
So, or 85, I guess it was 1985. But yeah, that was kind of the path to me realizing this is a career. So it was probably 7, 8 years into my working at Knott's that I realized I have a career here and there's a lot of opportunity.
So did you ever do the grad school at night or you just
You know, it's funny. I started it. I went through the LSAT for law school, and I went through, I think it was called the GMAT. It was for the grad, just the postgraduate work.
right?
And I realized I really liked general management, if not, MBA work more than I did, I thought, law work. So I started an MBA program at Cal State Fullerton. It was a night program.
Wow.
And I realized when I got in there, I was probably at the time maybe 23, 24. And I realized everybody else was in their 40s. It was kind of that era where everybody was going back for their MBAs, doing night
Uh,
school. And I thought, man, I'm out of touch here. I'm not that deep into my work to have good work stories to tell. And I'm not so committed to the schooling that I don't want to just dedicate more time to work. And so I ended up saying, oh, well, I'm going to come back to this. If I can get my MBA later, I'll do that. And I ended up just putting myself 100% into work, which allowed me to really get into the ride side of it, really get deeply into everything from the what we call business analytics and industrial engineering today. We weren't using those terms back then, but I really got into looking at capacities and throughput and theoretical and realistic and understanding what we needed to do if we were going to do more at Knott's once I took on the rides role. So I really put myself 100% into work at that point.
Yeah. So at one point, it seems like you were working with a gentleman named Terry Van Gorder who came from Magic Mountain, and he gave you a McKinsey report. Tell us about what's
yeah.
going on here.
Yeah, Terry, for those who may listen in on this, Terry was actually a golf course designer. He was a Yale graduate. He grew up at Stanford. His father was the groundskeeper at the golf course at Stanford University. He learned how to do golf course design. He got into naval intelligence, and he
Wow.
was working kind of during the Cold War period in the Andalusians between Alaska and Russia. And he ended up becoming a theme park guy, but a very cerebral, very thoughtful, very Terry wanted to understand the meaning of what parks were about. And so actually was involved with the Newhall Land Company, became the very first chief executive of Magic Mountain before Six Flags ever got involved. So Terry was there in 71 through I forget, I think Magic may have taken or Six Flags may have taken over like in 79 or somewhere around that time frame. But Terry was running it for that period. And then Terry left in 79 and then joined Knott's in 81. And so Terry and I became first acquainted in during that period, but really got to work with each other when I took over rides in 85. And he handed me this study that had been done. And I, again, my recollection is that it was a McKinsey study that Cedar Point had done, and Terry was using it at Magic Mountain just to kind of get a sense of what he needed to offer in terms of number of rides for meeting the metrics of success and keeping guests happy. And he gave it to me and said, "This is what we should do." And the report basically said you should offer two attractions or two rides per guest per hour during peak operating hours. So theoretically, mathematically, no more than a 30-minute wait per ride.
Right.
And I realized we could never get there at Knott's. We didn't have that number of rides at that time, nor did we have that kind of capacity. And so I was looking at it differently. And so I kind of took it away, began studying it. And I realized people came to Knott's for more than the rides. They came for Ghost
Mm.
Town. They came for the chicken dinners. They came for walking the Mission Trail. They came for the Church of Reflections. They came for the stunt show and for the Calico Saloon show and the Birdcage Theater. And it occurred to me that we really weren't counting things that I thought mattered. And I thought what mattered did count. And so I kind of started working off that framework, saying, if you can measure it, you can manage it. Let's start understanding the more subjective aspects of street shows and things that stop people and things that entertain people. And I came up with a different equation, which was I wanted experiences per guest per hour or entertainment units. And so I started using a different kind of category. And then I went back to Terry and said, "Terry, I know you wanted rides, but I think between all the things we have here at Knott's, we've got to look at it differently. It's not just about rides." And he loved it. He thought I think he thought, "You get it. You're the only guy around me who actually gets it. It is
Yeah.
experiential. It is an entertainment." And of course, Terry had a very strong view on education. He felt that parks could be educational. And of course, he put a lot of effort into Independence Hall, keeping it renewed and renovated, keeping Indian, we had a Native American area that we had introduced. We had Bigfoot Rapids. And as time
Yeah.
went on, we kept adding more and more, and he wanted them tied to educational messaging. So for me, even Mine Ride, Log Ride, they were educational. They talked about logging in the past. They talked about mining in the past. And so for me, I was able to really touch a chord with him
Mm.
where he liked the idea. And that kind of became my measuring. And then we started setting all the metrics for the rides team of really targeting how can we give more experiences per guest per hour during
Mhm.
peak operating hours. In our case, it might have been from 1 to 3 o'clock. And during that time frame, if we had 25,000 people in the park, we wanted to offer 50,000 entertainment units mathematically.
Wow.
That doesn't mean that the guests are going to spread themselves equally. A
Sure.
log ride still might have an hour wait, but I at least knew that I was offering enough to give that kind of diverse and exposed opportunity. And that became my metric for everything I did from that point forward, whether it was Camp Snoopy in Mall of America, whether it was a Marine World Africa USA, which
Oh,
became
right.
Six Flags Marine World. Today is Six Flags Discovery Kingdom, or whether it was Parque Warner
Yeah.
in Madrid, or whether it was Hong Kong's Ocean Park. But that really became my measuring stick for starting every design was let's make sure we understand our program, our demand, our need, and that we're not equivocating on it, that we're staying very focused that these are our standards for development. We have to hold to them. So long
Yeah.
story there, Ryan, but that
No,
all
that's
kind of stemmed from that report that Terry gave me.
yeah.
You know
Well,
what?
another
And
interesting. Oh,
Tom,
sorry.
I have to thank Tom because
Yeah.
when we were doing the expansion at Hong Kong Disneyland, I was in charge of the expansion there.
Yeah.
And um, and of course, that was always an argument at Disney, what do you count for capacity? And it was always, a click of the turnstile at a ride, so
Right.
when you're trying to figure out the hourly capacity for an area. But we took a different approach when we were doing the expansion in Hong Kong because we used the Ocean Park model, and
Ah,
that was counting all the experiences. And
sure.
as a result, I felt like we were able to get more out of that expansion because, things like the water play area in Grizzly Gulch or the photo op area in, excuse me, in the Mystic Point. We were counting those as capacity for the first time. And strangely enough, I don't think Disney did that elsewhere. Maybe now, I don't know. But again, tip of the hat to you, Tom, because we stole your model.
Well, another thing I wanted you to mention, Tom, is one thing I didn't really know is that the famous Bud Hurlbut, who built the log ride and the mine train at Knott's, did he actually own and operate those until this time? And then Knott's bought him out, or how did that work?
Yeah, he developed them. I don't think Walter Knott had the ability or the desire at the time. He was just trying to keep people entertained who were waiting for chicken dinners. And I think he had this partner in Bud Hurlbut who was developing these miniature trains. You might remember there was a miniature train that ran around the lake over on the other side of Beach Boulevard, which was called Jungle Island. And he
Oh,
also had a little train that used to run around inside the other park. And he had these things called Tijuana taxis. So the whole Fiesta Village area was really Bud Hurlbut's concession to run and operate. And then even when you looked at Log Ride, Mine Ride, because Mine Ride actually opened, I think, in 61, 60 or 61. Log Ride came along in 1969. And those were Bud Hurlbut designs and storytelling. And they fit perfectly with Walter Knott because he was all about America, the story of America, the growth of America, the history. And so, yeah, Bud started them. But interestingly enough, for anybody who goes back to the early days of Mine Ride and Log Ride, they were male-dominated attractions. The loggers were men, and miners were men, and so everybody running those attractions were men. So when I took over rides in 1985, one of the very first things, as I was seeking input from the team, were the female leads were coming to me saying, "Why aren't any women working at these attractions?"
yeah.
I said, I don't know. Let's inquire. And of course, the inquiry led us down the path of, well, there were no women loggers or women miners. Well, that's all the women needed was they went out and brought volumes in to demonstrate that is not true. There were women loggers, women miners. And so very quickly, we made the adjustment and put women into those attractions, which was great because they were proud. And the other thing it did for me as a leader or as a manager was I had realized in the short time I was there that the log ride and mine ride, while they were fantastic attractions, the inner workings, because they were all male, they were like fraternities. There was hazing that went on. There was all sorts of stuff that went on for new loggers and new miners. The minute we put the women in, that sort of hazing and that sort of fraternity stuff stopped. And it actually created more balance and I think more harmony on those attractions. They weren't these bastions of male just testosterone on overload.
Yeah.
And I think it gave us a little bit more balanced approach. I'm sure there was still some things going on that I never knew about, but it wasn't at the same level. And I think the teams really adjusted to it well. And quite frankly, it was the right thing to do. It gave me more staffing opportunity
Yeah.
immediately,
Right.
and it allowed us to just do things differently going forward. So yeah, that was kind of Bud Hurlbut had a great vision, and I think he was recognized years ago posthumously as a legend. But he and Walter Knott did some really cutting edge things for their time. With
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
again, I think Knott's like many of the places I've worked, we always had champagne taste and money for a Coke. And so we had to find a way to spread the dollar faster, longer, thinner,
Yeah.
and deliver things that were truly experiential with less money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Anybody that's watching, if you're interested in ride design, the Calico Mine Ride is a master class in ride design. It's brilliant, and most Imagineers have studied it, and it's influenced so many other rides elsewhere in the world. Indiana Jones has to tip their hat. I know Tony always talks about how you go through that center area, and that's
Yeah.
the equivalent to the glory hole that Bud designed into the mine ride. So
Yeah,
definitely
fantastic.
ahead of time.
Yeah. And you can see more of Bud's work. There's another little more of amusement park called Castle Park out in Riverside, not too far from Knott's. And Bud also somehow built some of the rides there too. They're not the immersive dark ride type things, but his
Yeah.
work lives on there too.
Well, his little shop, his machine shop where he did everything was literally in the parking lot off of Western and Knott. I'm sorry, it was between Western and Beach Boulevard and on La Palma Avenue. But you'd never see it because the horse barn for the stagecoach operation for Knott's was actually in front of it if you're driving by.
Um,
But his shop was right there for all those years, and he was building all the attractions even for Castle Park at that shop, and then running them out to Castle Park in Riverside to put him in when he owned it, when he owned
yeah.
it and ran it.
That's amazing. So let's get a little scary, Tom, because there was something you guys started working on around this time at Knott's Berry Farm. I think they had started maybe in the early 70s and experimented with doing kind of a Halloween event at Knott's, but tell us about what you did with that.
Well, yeah, all credit to the original kind of creators of Halloween at Knott's, because that was really, I think, a Gary Salisbury thing. Gary was the head of entertainment, and it was, I think, Bud Hurlbut and his team. But it really goes back because the park was free, and well, yes, we were free entry at that time. You pay as you go. And I think what happened was everybody kind of took it upon themselves to do their own design on their own things. And so you
Oh,
had this kind of non-connected story of just ghosts and goblins at different facilities. And it was fun and it was great. And the guys had, the loggers, the miners at the log ride, mine ride, or the haunted shack, or, all these facilities all had their own little thing going on. And then I think along the way, when the fences went up and it became a far better commercial opportunity, we never lost that grassroots effort. And so rides were the ones who were designing the mazes and the haunted houses. And we were using ride facilities to convert. Now, I wasn't in rides yet. I was still sweeping at this time.
okay.
But it was shortly after I took over rides, we realized there's a real opportunity here to do something on a more cohesive basis. The grassroots was great. It had a great spirit around it, but we needed to have more continuity, more common theming, more marketing. And it became apparent during some pretty lean years at Knott's that Halloween, that it made the entire year's profit for Knott's on some years. And the family
Wow.
became more apparently clear of it. The management became more clear of it. Terry Van Gorder, who had taken over Knott's at that point for the family in running it, not owning it, but running it, began realizing we've got something good here. And so for me in rides, it gave me a chance to work directly with entertainment, a fellow named Tom Clough. And Tom and I kind of came up with the idea that we need to make this more cohesive, use the technical skills of entertainment to actually put lighting and sound into these haunted houses on a proper basis, to create, blueprints before CAD of each of the houses, determine where the scares would be, how many talent we would need, how we would set it up, where you'd put the blackout talent to keep people moving and pushing them through, set the capacity standards, know the queuing requirements, and know what the park's capacity would be so you wouldn't sell out to a number that couldn't be accommodated. And
Right.
then building the entertainment, whether it was the Good Time Theater and having Wolfman Jack in there in the early days,
Yep.
or
Wow.
moving to Seymour, who used to do the Channel 9,
Yep.
horror movies, or which evolved to Elvira,
Yeah.
obviously. And then the type of shows we put in there, the Hanging in the Square, which used to be literally hanging witches every night, who would disappear and become a dove and fly off and say, "I'll be back," long before Arnold Schwarzenegger said it. And the idea being that the hanging was just a very simple show, but it became a social political satire
Mhm.
statement even before Bill and Ted at
Yep.
Universal, where we could just lambast everything that occurred in the year. And that was Tom Clough who was writing that. It was a brilliant kind of peek into Tom's mind of how he took the whole year's events and put them into a 20-minute show. And we got a letter from the Witches Union in Salem telling us we couldn't hang witches. And we thought, okay, we're going to hang warlocks. And then the Warlock Union reached out and said, you can't hang warlocks. And so that shifted to us hanging vice presidents of Knott's Berry Farm because nobody had an issue with that. And so every year it might be the marketing vice president, it might be the operations vice president. But that went on for a while. Then eventually we started using actually Freddy Krueger would show up, and Universal never took exception to it that I can recall. But Freddy Krueger came in and slashed everybody, and the story just flew all around the square, and it became like the reason you come. But anyway, yeah, Halloween was just a great time, and I used to participate. I would work all day and then put on makeup and a costume and sliding pads, and I would slide through Ghost Town with the team. And it was one of the funner things I did, or most fun
Yeah,
things I'd done, because you could literally just disappear into a character. No
yeah.
one knew who you were. And I kept doing that from Knott's to Vallejo when I took over Marine World, to Spain, to Hong Kong, and then that's kind of where it stopped.
Uh,
So
Where did that come from? Because Joe and I worked on some haunted houses for Hershey Park a few years ago, and they went to Knott's to study this sliding phenomenon. I don't think other people have done that. Where did that originate?
I don't know if I can answer that, Ryan, because that predates me taking over Halloween, but it became a signature element
Yes.
of Halloween, and specifically in Ghost Town, because you could fog up the streets,
Yeah.
you'd hang the jute all across the rooftops, contain the fog, and then the monsters could come out of the corners in the fog and scare the heck out of people on Main and
Yeah.
Market Street. And I don't, we'd probably have to pull in one of the Halloween haunt people from the
Okay.
early days,
Right.
but I think it was the stuntmen early on who wanted to do something and participate, and they got out there doing it. But then it became, I tell you, there were people who generationally were coming in and doing it. They were professionals. These people were teachers, and
Oh,
I think there was even a few attorneys in the group who just knew this was what they wanted to do on the weekend nights,
yeah. Yeah.
and they would come out with their whole kit. If you watch the talent come in the evenings at Knott's for Halloween, they roll their own cases in with all their equipment, all their pads, all the things that their kind of costume kit,
Wow.
independent of what Knott's was providing for costumes and makeup. But it became its own little kind of culture, counterculture in the company, that if you were a slider, you made it. That was what everyone aspired to be.
That's so
Wow.
cool. So 1990, Knott makes a deal to put a Camp Snoopy in Minnesota at the world's biggest mall, Mall of America. What role did you play here?
So I'll give you a little bit of a story on that one. So what happened was, Terry Van Gorder was the CEO of Knott's, and he was looking for ways to expand the revenue streams for the company, because the family was getting bigger, but the revenue streams weren't getting bigger. And so
Oh,
Terry had been approached, or was working with, at the time, the Gramasian family, 555 Corporation out of Canada, who had
mhm,
initially presented the idea of an indoor mall, with a theme park in the middle of it, much like the West Edmonton Mall.
mhm.
They weren't received very well in Minneapolis when they came in saying, "Here's what we're going to do." Um, so they were very smart. They turned around. They got Melvin Simon and Associates, who were American and local, in Indianapolis, and they came in, and the Gramasians kind of were silent partners, and the Simons were able to sell the idea. And so Veterans Stadium was removed, the Metrodome was built in Minneapolis, and the idea was, what are we going to do with this space? And so along came Terry, who said, I know exactly what we can do. We can do Camp Snoopy in the middle under a glass roof, where it's never more than or less than 72 degrees, no matter how cold it is outside or how hot and humid it is outside. And we're going to deliver Camp Snoopy in all of its glory in the center court of Mall of America. And so Terry and Robin Hall did the design and the development on it. And Terry came to a management meeting one day. He was carrying, I think, a Knott's flag, a big boysenberry K, and a Minnesota state flag. I think the loon was on it, their state bird. And I didn't even recognize the flag other than the Knott flag. And Terry made a very dramatic pitch to the management group at that point. I was sitting in the audience, and he said, "We're going to go plant our flag in Minnesota. I want to know who's with me." And I thought that was an invitation to run to the front of the room and join him. And so I got up and walked to the front of the room, and I was the only one who had done it.
Oh,
But I thought, well, you got to show an interest. You got to say you want to do it.
Yeah,
And I think many people who grew up in Southern California, lived in Southern California, thought that was a death sentence. That was Siberia. What do you mean? I'm not getting hazard pay to go to Minneapolis?
right.
And for me, it was like the greatest opportunity ever, and loaded up my dog and cat and wife and kids and off we headed to Minneapolis, and we built the Mall of America. Well, we built Camp Snoopy and Mall of America with a great team. It wasn't me personally, obviously, but we did it in a way that I think was truly unique. It became the most successful fusion of retail and entertainment in the United States. Probably still is, I think, to this day. We were attracting some 30 million people to the mall back when it opened in 92. And I think the most recent thing I saw was there's something like 42 to 45 million going to the mall. But it was a truly unique thing that I think captured the imaginations of people. And it was a pay-as-you-go environment. It was free flowing. So we had to create a whole new ticketing system, a whole new approach to how we would do it. And my job was to determine how we would do it and create the detailed spec for the ticketing system for rides and decrementing. And so we saw the subway systems were doing decrementing tickets. You had stored value, you'd scan it, you'd decrement the value, and then
Right.
you go. And so we set point values for all the rides, much like A through E ticket approach, but we put a point value on it and a value on the points. And we created these ATMs at the time called automated ticket selling machines. And I went out and began getting all the detailed specs from all of the divisions of Knott, saying, what is it we want this system to accomplish? And I got reams of paperwork from everybody of what it should do for admissions and cash control and operations. And I got a one sentence statement as a detailed spec from marketing. And I thought it was great. I still use it to this day. The line was, the system should not impede the creativity of marketing. I thought, all right, that says it all. So anyway, it was a great experience, a great opportunity. And I think to this day, even though it's now Nickelodeon Universe,
Yeah.
it changed over. The mall's running it now. And I think the Gramasian family has become less of a silent partner. They're now owning and operating both that mall and the mall in New Jersey. But they're great reflections, I think, of really great thought that went into designing, developing diversionary locations that merged entertainment, retail, and food.
Yeah. So right at
How
this
many,
time,
how many years did it exist as Camp Snoopy?
Oh my goodness, Joe. I don't know if I'm going to get this one right. I mean, we opened in 92, and then when Cedar Fair bought Knott's Berry Farm in 97, and took over in 98, we continued it, but that probably went on for maybe 4 or 5 years. But I think Cedar Fair realized it wasn't generating a lot of money and it was a lot of effort. Plus, they had Valley Fair down the street and they wanted a Camp Snoopy in Valley Fair. So I think the idea was to negotiate a separation from the mall, and then the mall would take over. They did their new overlay of Nickelodeon, which then allowed for Camp Snoopy to be shifted over to Valley Fair to fit all the other Cedar Fair parks.
okay. So right around this time, Tom, I was actually working with Joe Mack from Knott on what became Warner Brothers Movie World. We were in Burbank together, then we were out in Germany together. And soon after that park opened and I left, he was moving to Madrid to take over and open up the Warner Brothers Movie World in Madrid, Park Warner Madrid. But then, wait, what happened here? He left Madrid and they called you, or what's, you moved to Europe?
So what happened was Warner Brother Recreation Engineering under Nick Winslow and Larry Wyatt and the team, they were doing a great job. They had come up with the Dusseldorf Park, the Warner Brothers Germany Movie World, and then I think they had an opportunity to bid on the design and development of a theme park in Madrid, and they won the bid from all the other companies that were trying to get there. And Madrid, I think, was still kind of stinging from Disney not selecting Madrid when they picked Paris. So for Madrid, they wanted their own park. They felt they should have it. They felt Barcelona had Portaventura. I think for one of the world's fairs, they opened up Isla Mágica in Sevilla. And then even along the way, an independent group came up with the Benidorm Park, which was Terra Mítica,
Yeah, I've been there.
which then Paramount began running. But I think the Spanish authorities in Madrid, being the capital city, wanted their own park. And so they formed a group that involved 5 different major contractors from around the country, as well as El Corte Inglés, the main retailer, and then the main banking institution at the time, Caja Madrid, and then the community. I always want to say it in Spanish, the Comunidad de Madrid. The community of Madrid, Obras Públicas, Public Works, began leading the charge. And so they selected Warner Brothers. Six Flags then began a procurement boom where they were buying rights to parks, Wallaby Parks, and also Warner Brother Movie World Parks for Europe, and the rights for the US. The Village Roadshow had the rights for Asia and Australia, so this never included the one that was in Brisbane. But it was greenfield. It was completely, start from scratch in an area about 25 kilometers southeast of Madrid called San Martin de la Vega. And Larry Wyatt and the team from WBRE had laid it out beautifully, a great master plan. They had done all the metrics for it. It was well conceived. And Six Flags bought it and bought the rights to it. And so I got a call as I was doing the Marine World Park in Vallejo. We had just finished getting all the rides installed. Everything was running. We had taken market share from Santa Clara. We were booming. We went from 700,000 a year to 2.1 million people a year, and we were getting ready to start paying back the revenue anticipation notices. And got a call from Gary Story and Kieran Burke, who were running Six Flags at the time, and they said, we'd like to have you take on this new opportunity. We've just bought the rights to Warner Brothers in Madrid. How'd you like to move there? And I didn't even hesitate. I just said, absolutely. So again, loaded up my wife, the kids, the dog, the cat, and we headed off to Madrid. And we took over the development of it. Unfortunately, when these sort of mergers and acquisitions take place, I think it led to the demise of WBRE as we knew it, and Six Flags took everything on. But we had the team from WBRE working with us for a period to understand everything before it was taken over. And again, I mentioned this before, Larry Wyatt did a fantastic design, he and his team. So it wasn't a matter of tweaking design, but it was a matter of finding a way to maybe do it cheaper, because we could buy, Six Flags is buying rides in bulk. We could get rides cheaper.
Right.
We could potentially negotiate better deals than maybe Warner could. So it allowed us to get the project on budget and on time, which were a bit of a challenge when we first took it over. And that became my job, deliver this park on budget, on time, and at a standard that nobody had seen previously. And it was a fantastic park. I mean, when we opened in 92, I was pretty proud of what we had opened and the storytelling and the capabilities. But I think many people will know that when that park opened in 2002, we had survived the 9/11 event, which I think just literally crushed our industry. It crushed ride manufacturers. It crushed a lot of creative companies who just couldn't finish their work, from Landmark to Sound Deluxe Showworks to Rock and Water to Intamin. I mean, there were a number of people that couldn't survive that shock of 9/11. And we had to get the park finished. The rides finished, the shows finished, the park finished in all that time. And I'm very lucky. We had a great group of dedicated professionals who stuck with it and helped us get it finished. And we delivered it, I thought, in every level of expectation that we had set for it. And then I got a call to head to Hong Kong, completely unrelated to Six Flags, completely unrelated to anything, but just a park that they wanted me to come and run.
Wait, so after you left Spain, I thought that's when you went to Vallejo. Was Vallejo before Spain?
Vallejo was before Spain. And then
okay.
I kind of got off track, Ryan. I should get back to the question you asked about Joe.
Yeah.
Joe basically was getting things prepped in Madrid before he was preparing to be the person in Madrid. And I think they were prepping someone to be his replacement in Dusseldorf. But when I was brought in, they asked Joe if he would mind going back to Dusseldorf. And Joe and Norma, his husband or his wife, they were very happy to head back there. Although Joe loved Spain. Joe had worked, I think, in Argentina for an early part of his career after Magic. And so Joe had a Spanish and loved the culture. But Joe moved back to Dusseldorf. He was well loved there and very connected to the community. And Norma Ray, his wife, was very connected as well. So my wife and I met Norma and Joe. We got a quick tour of Madrid and got a lay of the land before Joe then headed back to Dusseldorf. And then I took over the role in Madrid. And I had the foundation that Joe had set and the kind of the WBRE vision. And then it was a matter of how do we layer the Six Flags components into it and get some of the things that we knew we needed to do for budget and for schedule in place.
Right.
and off we ran. And so I officed in Madrid initially before we moved out to the site, and then we moved out to the site. And again, it was an absolute labor of love. It was a great place to live and work. And we delivered, I thought, a really great park with some really great people participating in it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, my mistake. I totally skipped over the whole 1998 era when you left Knott's
Yeah,
after Cedar Fair purchased them and you moved up north to Vallejo to take over
yeah,
Discovery Kingdom.
yeah.
Do you have any fun stories about Discovery Kingdom that?
Oh, I think the challenge is always when you have animal parks is how do you integrate rides into an animal park? Because that park had none. They had no rides. Mike Demetrius had been running Marine World Africa USA for years in Redwood City, south of San Francisco. I think the owners of the property decided that they wanted to do something with residential development, so it forced him to have to move. And
Mm,
about that time, I think bases were being closed, and the biggest Pacific Fleet dry dock and maintenance area was Mare Island, which is part of Vallejo, California. And when Mare Island closed, it put the city into a real tough spot. And the city reached out to Mike Demetrius and made him an offer that they would fund the development through something called revenue anticipation notices, RANs, and the park would pay them back as they got their footing and got going. And Mike did a brilliant publicity thing with his team. They basically loaded the animals on a big barge and came across the San Francisco Bay from San Francisco to Napa or to Vallejo like Noah's Ark and delivered the animals to the park. And the park was built and set up specifically for marine mammal and land animal presentations, and it was on an entertaining basis more than it was on a education conservation basis. So
right.
it was taking a little bit different approach because they had people that were raising and handling tigers, and so they were on Tiger Island with the tigers demonstrating their behaviors. You didn't really see that anywhere else, unless you went to Siegfried and Roy. But this is a place where the teams were out with the animals, and the animals were engaging, and again, it just got you closer to nature. But Mike couldn't make it work. Mike Demetrius couldn't, and the city had to take it over. And then Six Flags made an offer to the city that they would take it over, run it, and insert rides and attractions to make it a Six Flags park. And in so doing, they would trade out property they invested in with property that wasn't developed on the land. And it became a land swap opportunity to eventually allow Six Flags to not only swap out the land, but then buy the property from the city at the right time, but pay down their revenue anticipation notices, get the city out of a bind from the debt that they had taken on, and then ultimately give Six Flags a cornerstone that they could be very proud of. And so I got to be a part of that project because Dan Alward. Dan Alward was running that park at the time. He had been brought in from a park in Idaho, Silverwood, and was running it for Six Flags. And then Dan got the nod to go to Europe to take on all the European parks that Six Flags had bought. And they asked if I would come in and take over that park after Dan. And so Dan had started the initial investments of rides, attractions, and the rebranding. And then I was there for the full rebranding to Six Flags Marine World and the completion of all rides before they bought the Warner Brother interest, and I was asked if I would move to Spain.
Got it. Okay. Wow.
So, but I got a really good exposure to animals under human care, and I realized that that park had a sister relationship with Ocean Park.
Ah,
And there was a fellow named John Corcoran who used to be the operations person at Marine World Africa USA who had taken the helm at Ocean Park in Hong Kong sometime during the transition of ownership with that park. And so I didn't know John, but I knew the park and so I got to really understand animal husbandry and reproduction and artificial insemination and expanding genetic lines. And that's it. So when Ocean Park became available, I knew immediately it was Ocean Park that was hiring,
yeah.
even though I was told a major theme park is hiring in Hong Kong. And I knew Disney was building. I knew Disney wasn't going to hire me. My hair was probably still too long at that point. So I ended up making the move to Ocean Park, and I always loved being in kind of that David position to Goliath. And
Yeah.
Ocean Park was certainly a David Goliath story, but it was a free canvas to
Yeah.
paint, design, develop, and do whatever we thought was right for the property. And for me, it was the greatest growth opportunity in my career because I was the chief executive and I was able to guide the decisions with our chairman and with the city of Hong Kong. And we did some amazing things. We just, we redefined the park.
Mm.
We basically, you know, brought in the best and kept the rest in terms of redeveloping the park. We did it in 8 phases over 6 years, invested nearly $1 billion, and it was all
Wow.
done while the park operated. And I think we delivered just an exceptional experience for
Oh
our
yeah.
guests.
Yeah.
And in
Wow.
probably one of the most challenging sites
Yeah,
Yes.
geographically. I mean,
yeah.
it's a mountain. There's a lower
Surrounded
area.
by the ocean.
I was always
No,
amazed.
topographically, you couldn't ask for anything more difficult, but Hong Kong was used to that, and that was not a challenge to them. Tunneling through a mountain and creating an indoor funicular that
Right.
takes you from lowland to highland, it was not an issue in any way. In fact, it was the cheaper solution than doing overground or even on water
Wow.
transportation. So for me, it was great. I took all my experience with animals now and was applying it to Ocean Park. And I had a great zoological team. But our mission was conservation, education, entertainment. It never vacillated. And I felt it was a differential value that allowed us to be more than complementary and supplementary to Disney
Yeah.
in Hong Kong. We didn't have to worry about competing, certainly not privately. Well, let me say publicly. We never talked about competition publicly, but you always know privately. You're talking about how do I get market share? How do I get the attendance that I'm looking for? How do I pay my bills? And how do I grow my cash surplus so I can keep reinvesting and keep growing the business?
Sure. So how did you
Another
market
thing
it
we
to be
did,
different
uh,
from what Joe was doing a couple miles away?
Well, what we said was we have to focus on our differential values. So, if any of you have had a chance to see my book, Taming the Mouse, it was based on what we did in Hong Kong. And it was really about the fact that I sat down with the team and with our chairman. We said, what makes us different? Well, we're nature. We are not fantasy. We're reality. And
Mhm.
so we started using the line, the difference is real. And we said, you want to see the fantasy mouse, go to Disneyland. You want to see the real rodent, come to Ocean Park. We got a 45 kilogram web-footed rat called the capybara
Oh yeah.
that you can learn about. But we focused on the difference. Disney tries very hard to hide their view sheds and let you only see the land you're in. We celebrated the view sheds because we were on a hill. We wanted you to be able to see the South China Sea and see the shipping lanes. And we brought nature in. So we got you closer to nature. And so we started listing all the differential values that we thought gave us a positioning that allowed us to be really formidable in terms of how we would compete with Disney for market share and how we would reach out and garner attendance and build the business. And I think we were very successful. We went from doing 2 million a year in the SARS year, which was 2003, to almost 8 million a year by the time we had finished the development. Now,
Wow.
I got to give credit to Disney because had Disney never come to Hong Kong, there would have been less tourism to Hong Kong. So Disney's presence created more, the tide rose and all the ships floated higher. So the reality is Disney's presence created critical mass. It was no different than Disney and Knott's being almost in the same market in California. But I often said in any of the interviews I did, I'm happy Disney's coming. It gives me opportunity. We could not have made the investment. We could not have done the development. We could not have done what we did at Ocean Park if it weren't for Disney coming, because they caused opportunity with the legislative council, with the government to focus on tourism, and they knew they had to upgrade Ocean Park to be a complement to Disney. And so I stepped in at a perfect time post SARS to be able to help guide the company with a really great team of people. Again, I could not have been blessed with a greater team of people who were there, who were all local,
Yeah.
except for my zoological director, who was American, who came out of SeaWorld, and she was fantastic in terms of really keeping the focus on conservation and education while we were also developing entertainment.
Oh. Now, did they do Halloween event there?
yeah,
Yes, it preceded my arrival.
Very good.
A fellow named Paul Pay
Uh,
and Randy Guthrie. Randy Guthrie was running the park at the time, and then he was the CEO, and Paul Pay was the marketing person. And it was 2001. They thought, we're going to do a Halloween. And it was a bit of a challenge for them because 9/11 happened and there was a lot of questions in 2001. Do we do this? Is this the right thing to do with the world feeling the way it is? And they overcame some of the challenges and said, yes, we're going to do it, but we're going to do it as a pay-as-you-go experience. So the haunted houses were pay-as-you-go. When I came along in 2003, 4, I had suggested we convert Halloween to a hard ticket event. And that instead of kicking everyone out, we would just wristband everybody coming in and we'd let the day crowd, night crowd mingle. But the day crowd would realize, I can't see anything, I can't do anything, it's time to go. And then the night crowd would basically take over. So we never really closed the gate and flushed the park. It was a little bit different model. And it allowed us to take the event to a whole new level. And I went out every night. Almost, that's an exaggeration. I went out probably, if we did 30 nights, I probably went out 20 nights in costume. So I would work all day, and then the wardrobe team and the makeup team would come up with elaborate, fantastic costumes. And my only comment was, whatever you do, I want to slide. So
Now,
allow
was
me to
it?
be flexible enough to slide. But if any of you have ever done a Halloween shift, and I didn't take breaks, I just worked all night long. It's like, you sweat more than you could possibly imagine. You lose more body weight, especially if you're sliding, because you're literally on your knees, popping up in a walking stance and passing your subject and moving on to the next one. But they were great nights. I loved every minute of it, and I made sure that every Halloween night, actual Halloween, I would invite all the management to come out in costume and bring their spouses. So we'd make the Halloween night a night where all the monsters came out.
Right.
And we'd do great big photos and celebrate the evening and have a dinner set up for everybody. So nobody ever felt like they were working. But
Yeah.
Halloween in Hong Kong was a photo op. It was a huge thing for guests to want to sit down and or meet the talent and do photos with them.
Yeah.
And so whenever you heard my staff go into the makeup room and they'd say, what would you like to be? The staff would say, make me look pretty, which I always thought was funny. It was kind of counterintuitive, but they all wanted to go out and do photos with the guests because the
Yeah.
guests just love taking photos with the monsters. But I had elaborate costumes. I was a zombie sliding, twerking Elvis Presley one year. Yeah,
We
I
need
did all
video of
sorts.
that.
I was Austin Powers one year in a blue velvet suit and sliding, and
Wow.
the team just came up with fantastic ideas that allowed me to go out and just literally escape in the
Yeah.
character for the evening.
Wow. Now, Joe, when you worked on Mystic Manor, wasn't it a belief that the Chinese culture did not accept ghosts and scary, and that's why Disney did not do the Haunted Mansion at Hong Kong Disneyland?
That was one of the reasons, but I got to say, we again, we took a cue from Tom, and I think Hong Kong was the first Disney park to do, an actual haunted walkthrough. We did two of them. I
Oh,
think 2008 or nine, maybe. I can't remember, but the entertainment group there did it. But again, it was in direct response to Ocean Park. They wanted to get a little piece of that business. So getting
yeah,
back to
Yeah.
what Tom was saying, I think both parks benefited from each other in many
yeah,
ways.
Well, the beauty of that Halloween too was fun because Disney did it and it took on more of a romantic thing where boys and girls came on dates and they could
Yeah.
hold each other tight as they went through the house, whereas we groups came to our park, groups of teens, big groups of girls, big groups of boys, and it was more about come out for the experience more than the dating thing. So we found we could survive in the same market and both garner tremendous market penetration without actually competing because we were getting two completely different motivations of market visitation. And it allowed Hong Kong to think of itself as a Halloween destination. And the Hong Kong Tourism Board started thinking about how could they own Halloween in Southeast Asia as a city going forward.
wow. So, Tom, you won your first or the first applause award in all of Asia working for um, Ocean Park, correct? And then
Yeah,
you
it was the
also,
first recognition of an Asian park for the Applause Award, and it was Ocean Park. We won that in 2012, and that was an incredible, prideful moment for the team. I had had the benefit of winning it in '88 with Knott's Berry Farm. It was the year we put in Bigfoot Rapids, and Knott's was really becoming unique in so many ways in '88 onwards because of all the attractions we'd put in. But Along came Ocean Park, and I thought, this park is equivalent, if not better, than any park I've ever been to. And so we submitted the application. We had the panel come out and review us. And I think the Asia show that year gave a number of the voting members a chance to see the park in all of its glory. And so, yeah, we were very fortunate to win that year. We were up against, I think, Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk and Puy to Fou. And so, some pretty good
Oh,
offerings, to say the least,
wow.
historical and
Yeah.
also cultural. And we felt very fortunate that we were recognized that year, and we walked away with the applause award. And then, Universal Japan just happened to win it this past year. So I'm kind of proud that I've had
Wow.
a chance to be a part of three parks that have won the applause award over time, and
Yeah. Wow.
each
So
one unique in their own.
so you leave Ocean Park and you open your own company now that you've run all these parks. You can advise other theme parks. So you called it Themed Advisors. Tell us about that.
Well, what happened was 2016 was approaching, and the board had already asked if I would renew. So I came to Ocean Park on the thought that it would be a 4-year experience. I'd be gone. I'd define the master plan. We'd get it built in 4 years. That was kind of a pipe dream, if you think about that, the scale.
Right.
And then I'd be gone and I'd go on to the next thing, whatever the next thing was. But 4 years became 8 years, eight became 12. And 12 was going to become 16 when I said, you know what? Everything I set out to do when I came here, we've accomplished. We've grown the park. We've made major investments. We've expanded the capacity. We put it on the map. We've defined hotels. The hotels were under construction. We defined a water park. It was under construction. We had created a destination within Hong Kong equivalent to, if not greater than, Hong Kong Disney. And it was a reason for the Hong Kong government to celebrate tourism. And I thought, I've done everything I came to do. It's time to do something different. And so I had notified the board that I was not going to be renewing,
Mhm.
and that I'd be happy to be a part of selecting the next CE, the chief executive for the company. And I was promoting the idea that they look at our CFO, Matthias Lee, because Matthias had the history, the legacy. He knew, and the government knew Matthias, and so Matthias ended up getting selected after a worldwide job posting and interview process. And so I was very happy for Matthias to get the role. And so happened I started Themed Advisors based out of Hong Kong, and my
Wow.
very first client was Ocean Park. The board had asked if I'd be willing to guide them for, or at least help Matthias for the year, or be available for him. And it was a wonderful opportunity to kind of get my feet on the ground as an advisor. But it didn't take long. I ended up forming a partnership with my former chairman, Alan Zeman, in Lan Kwai Fong. And we were working all around the world. We were doing work in Australia, right here in California, and everywhere else, from Thailand to China, and realizing that I was missing the heartbeat of a park. I loved doing the advisory work. It was lucrative, it was fun, but it wasn't running a park. And so I kept getting calls from Universal asking me if I would join them in Beijing. They wanted me to run the park. And I said, no, I'll give you names, but I've just started my own business. I'm not interested in making the move. And they said, no, we don't want names. We want you. And so a fellow named Paige Thompson, who runs New Ventures for Universal, was handling the international arm of the park at that time. And he just stayed very persistent. He called me in one July evening in Hong Kong and said, are you ready to come? We're going to fill it in earnest. And I said, Paige, you couldn't have called it a better time. I'm just missing the energy of the park. Yes, I want to get in. And I thought there'd be nothing bigger or grander than a Beijing park, the biggest investment and the biggest park ever made in the most populous country in the world. I want to be a part of it. It's
Yeah.
once in a lifetime. And so I relocated to Beijing, put my consulting business on hold,
Mhm.
and got involved in the most dynamic project you can possibly imagine in the biggest country in the world for population and emerging economy and government partnership and state-owned enterprise and all the challenges that come with it, not to mention COVID, which came along and
Yeah.
Wow.
disrupted a few things.
Wow.
Wow. So you guys must not own a bunch of stuff if you're able to just pick up and move internationally.
Oh no, no, it's funny. In 2000, when I first started my first international assignment,
Yeah.
my wife and I took the equity from a home we had in Walnut Creek when I was working for Marine World, and we
Right.
plowed it into a home in Lake Arrowhead and said, let's pick a place that we want to be in California. that allows us to unpack bags, or at least her and the kids to unpack bags for the summer and be at a place where they don't have to just keep moving from house to house or being an imposition to family. And
Okay.
so we bought in Lake Arrowhead, and it's the primary residence. So everything kind of ended up here at the primary residence, but
Okay.
ultimately we were pretty mobile. I mean, we could get up and go whenever we had to, and we had
Ah,
a place we could send things if we needed to store it somewhere. So
right. Right. That's amazing. So you're at Universal. We're at about 2020 or so. You wrote your book, came out in 2018, Taming the Mouse.
yep.
And then how did you become the president of Universal's Pacific Rim Parks? That's amazing.
So yeah, we the book itself was just a that was a passion project, and I'm lucky that Michael Swito, a writer for the industry, approached me and said, "You've got a great story.
Oh,
I'd like to write it for you, and I'll be your ghostwriter." And I said, "Michael, if you're going to write it, you're going to be a co-author." Uh, but he basically took hours and hours of recordings of me talking him through everything about getting Ocean Park developed, and we turned it into principles of leadership, and then we turned it into cohesive chapters, and then we turned it into a number of other things that became more reasonable principles of leadership for any business, and that became the guiding principle. But yeah, I got into Beijing, and I began the process of understanding the nature of what we were into and what was going to have to be done to get this park built. And it required every single principle I wrote in the book. It never ended.
yeah.
But basically, we began the process of developing it. Then COVID hit, and I jokingly say I did 2 years of solitary confinement and hard labor in China because I was there alone. My wife, my kids, everybody stayed behind for that one. The kids were grown, they were on to their own lives. My wife was taking care of aging parents and grandkids that were coming. So we said, "This is great. Don't worry. I'll be home every other month. You can come to me every other month." And then, of course, COVID hit. I said goodbye to her in December of 19 and said hello again in December of 21.
Oh
But
my God.
we got the park open in 21, September of 21. And I had mentioned at the time to Tom Williams that I was not going to be continuing on. I was done. And I'd like to be able to, get it ready for the next person to take over. And so we began the process of identifying a successor. And Tom Williams had decided to retire about a similar time frame, and he was involved in appointing Mark Woodbury as the head of Universal Destinations and Experiences, back then UPR,
Right.
Universal Parks and Resorts. And Mark was taking over the helm, and reached out to me one evening while I was in Beijing and said, "Hey, I've got a thought. I'm going to break it up. I'm going to have Karen Irwin move from Hollywood and take on the Orlando properties. I'd like to have you take on Hollywood, Japan, Beijing, and we'll leave Singapore with the licensing partnership under Paige Thompson. And we'd like to have you run it." And I said, "Mark, I'd love to do it. If I could relocate to California, that'd be great." He says, "Absolutely. We got a place for you all set up. Come on over." And so I made the move, and it was just so natural. And it felt so good to be a part of Hollywood, because what a team,
Yeah.
what a historical park, what a park of legacy and stories and everything. So I just felt lucky to be a part of that park, but still be connected to Japan and to Beijing, and all great parks in their own right. I mean, Japan, the number one most attended park in the world outside of Disney, Florida, I think 2 years running prior to this. I thought we could probably do Taming the Mouse too
Yeah.
for Japan. But anyway, the park's done really well, and I felt really good to be a part of those properties. And so when this contract was ready to be renewed, I had mentioned to Mark, I'm only going to do the one term. I'm ready to retire. I've spent a lot of time away from family, a lot of time away from, things that really matter to me. And so it was a great opportunity for me to just say, look, I'm going to end it in September of 2025, and I'm going to start something completely new. And I think there was a thought that I might be going into other facets of the industry. And I
Uh,
said, no, I'm not. Believe me, I'm stepping completely away, and I'm moving on to, family ranching and a whole different business that my wife created during COVID. So
yeah,
anyway,
that's
long
great.
story
Yeah,
there for you.
Yeah.
that's what you call leaving on a high note, though, Tom.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely leaving on a high note.
Yeah. So amazing story, Tom. So, Joe, you want to ask Tom the burning question?
Well, let's ask it as we always do at the end
Yes.
of our journey here. what is it that makes an experience timely yet
Yeah,
timeless?
timeless.
You know, I this is a question that probably is asked a lot in different ways, and I asked it of myself as well. I'm taken back to my kind of mentorship with Terry Van Gorder at Knott's Berry Farm, because Terry had this very firm belief that attractions have to be both visceral and cerebral. And I've always felt that no matter how technologically driven we become, whether it's AR, VR, multi realities, or whatever it may be, you've got to still stay connected to your guest, both viscerally and cerebrally. And I think that parks that balance cerebral and visceral get it right. The ones that can tell the story, that can engage the guest, that can immerse the guest, that can make them feel as if they're intellectually connected, but also emotionally connected. Those are the parks that succeed and live through time. They evolve, they grow, they change, they're constantly able to meet the guest need. And I think that to me has always been the case. Whenever I looked at an attraction, I always looked at it from the standpoint of, can we make this both cerebral and visceral? And I was lucky at Ocean Park because we were conservation, education, entertainment. Everything we did had to touch all three cornerstones. At Universal, it was all about IP, but we could still do it. We could still, it was the way in which the attraction was delivered that became somewhat cerebral and visceral. And again, if you could use technology to make the experience better, if you could use apps to make it better, so you're not burying a guest's nose in their phone, but they're actually using it to enhance their experience. Those for me were always the discussions I had at the table when we were trying to do something bigger, better, bolder. Is let's not lose sight of the fundamentals of what a guest is looking for, because I don't think it'll ever change. Human nature won't change. Faith Popcorn wrote a book years ago called Cocooning, and she was convinced that the cottage industry of home theater was going to take over and nobody would ever go out again. But she missed the fact that people are social beings and will need to be with one another and need to experience things. That's why theaters still do well. People want to go see the big movie in a big theater and hear the crowd response, and people like the gathering of other people. And that energy is contagious. So I would say that's it, Joe. If I could answer it in a few words.
Yeah,
Fabulous,
that's
Tom.
awesome.
Well, Tom, thank you so much
Yes.
for joining us today and taking us on this amazing journey. And I just have to say, listening to all you've accomplished, it had such a far-reaching effect through the entire indry.
Yes. Even with Disney, with you,
Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah. So again, another tip of the hat and another thank you for all the amazing things you did and how much it really, really affected so many of us, throughout the industry. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
no problem. I appreciate you guys asking me to be a part of this. I got a chance to sit in the time machine years ago with you, Ryan, but we didn't go anywhere.
Yes, exactly.
Now we got to go
Oh,
somewhere.
Becky, we should have put that photo up. I totally forgot about that.
I know, I'm thinking about it right now. I'm like, where can I find it really quick?
All right. Well, Tom, stay there. Becky's going to play a video, wrap it up, and then we will be back for a live Q&A.
Sure.
And for everyone else, Joe, where do you want to go now? What sounds
Oh,
good?
geez. All that talk of Hong Kong, I haven't been there in years. Let's just fire up the machine. Let's do a quick.
Let's go back to when Tom opened the whole expansion of Ocean Park. That would be amazing.
Okay, right away. All
Okay.
right,
All right.
thanks
You're off.
again.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you,
Happy
guys.
Thanksgiving.
All right, we hope you guys enjoyed the ride. And thank you so much to our friend Tom Mehrmann for time traveling with us today. If you have questions for Tom, stick around for our live Q&A in just 60 seconds. On behalf of Zeitgeist Design and Production, we thank you for spending your time with us on the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. If you enjoyed the journey, please check out all 47 of our time travel adventures on our YouTube channel or under the Zoomcast section at zeitgeist-usa.com. Remember, they're also available as podcasts wherever you listen, so tell your friends. Set your timepieces now for noon Pacific on Friday, December 12th. Joe will be traveling, so our friend Tom Morris will jump back in the time machine with Ryan for a second flight with former WDI president, author, and TEA Lifetime Achievement recipient, Bob Weiss. We wish our American listeners a very happy Thanksgiving, and for those traveling to Orlando for the annual IAPA trade show next week, bring comfy shoes and your hand sanitizer. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Get it?